appreciate y'all not laughing. I know some of you did. I also noticed that Senator Dugan, he got to put his hot coffee on my tablet.
It's economic development. You'll need a new one.
These things are cheap now. Also want to recognize Senator Brass and Representative Collins for getting the memo today. We appreciate you wearing the uniform. The other guys, damn rebels.
We look good.
Y'all do look sharp.
We know. We know.
Kind of before and after picture. So, thank y'all for being
Appreciate you
here.
and Senator Dugan getting the memo on the hairstyle.
So it's gonna be one of those.
It just got real.
The questions just changed.
I guess we'll see Matt Brass make a trip to Ross to get more hair product.
Hey,
So-
hey, I ain't said anything.
Again. Okay, so.
Yeah, but
Representative Cooke, Senator Brass, Representative Collins, Representative Nix, Senator Dugan, thank y'all so much for joining us this morning. On behalf of the chamber, we appreciate you guys being here. What we'd like to do, of course, we're going to kind of keep this loose and informal if you haven't caught on to that. What we're going to do is just kind of go down the line, let y'all pass the mic, Beastie Boys style, and tell us a little bit, tell us who you are, maybe what committees you serve on, and maybe one priority coming up for this session that you think might be important to you.
Sure.
And we'll get into some very pointed questions.
Jay said, I'm Kevin Cooke. I represent District 18 in the State House. I have been there now for 4 terms, or in the middle of the 4th term. I had nice dark hair when I started. As y'all can see under this light, it glistens. So I represent a portion of Carroll and Haralson County. I'm on 7 different committees, and I'd name them all, but it'd take 5 minutes. So it's an honor to get to serve the area I grew up in, this area, Carrollton High School grad, and love this area. Thankful to be here this morning.
Matt Brass, District 28, State Senate, so I represent all of Coweta County, all of Heard County, about half of Troup County, Chattahoochee Hills area of Fulton County, and then I have 4 precincts in Carroll County, and that's Lowell, Hewlett, Fairfield, and Whitesburg. And I just finished my first session. Got sworn in back on January 9th, and it's been an interesting year. So I've enjoyed it though, and it's been an honor because I grew up in Noonan, right next door, and have seen this entire side of the state grow and prosper. And I've enjoyed being a part of that in this past year. So my committees are, I serve as Senator Dugan's vice chairman on economic development and tourism. Excuse me. I know, I get emotional when I talk about this. Mainly because he beats me. But no, so I'm also on small local government, state local government operations, serve on natural resources, serve on redistricting and reapportionment, and I'm a ex officio on science and technology, and then I also serve on education and youth.
Is that all the committees you have?
Well, half the Senate's leaving next year, so I'm sure I'll get more.
I'm Jay Collins. I represent House District 68, which encompasses Temple, Villa Rica, comes down and catches Fairfield and Center Point communities, and then jogs over to the east and catches the Fairplay community in Douglas County. I've enjoyed representing the people of House District 68 during my first session. I'm a freshman, obviously. Love this community, grew up in Villa Rica, Villa Rica High School graduate. Over the last several years, I've worked with many of you on different projects to help Carroll County, Carrollton, Villa Rica, those areas. Looking forward to my second session, and the goal that I hope that we have is less legislation next session. I serve on Public Safety, Homeland Security, Juvenile Justice, and the Governmental Affairs Committee. I've enjoyed getting to know these gentlemen a little more, and working with my colleagues over there, just trying to learn about the institution of the House and how I can better represent the people of House District 68, and look forward to serving for hopefully several more terms.
I'm Randy Nix, and I represent House District 69, which is parts of Carroll and Troop and all of Hurd County. I've got about half of the southern part of Carroll County. This is my 11th year, so I'm by far the old man here in a lot of different ways. And I appreciate the fact y'all have given me that opportunity. Like Kevin, I serve on 7 different committees, and Kevin, I wrote mine down so I could remember because I can't remember. I chair the Ethics Committee, which also allows me to be an ex officio of the dreaded Judiciary Committee. If you want to be excited about watching paint dry, you just go sit through a Judiciary Committee meeting and you'll get real excited watching paint dry. I'm on the Appropriations Committee for Education. I'm on Banks and Banking. I'm on Education, Economic Development and Tourism, and Natural Resources and Environment. There are a number of things just a quick thing about this upcoming session. I think it's going to be very interesting politics that'll play out because of the number of people in the General Assembly who are running for other offices. I did a quick count, and I know that there are at least 6 House members who've already resigned for either to run or do something. So we'll have a fair number of new members, and I think this is kind of going to be a watershed year because there's going to be a number of people that are there now who will probably not run again, will not be there coming up. So it's going to be it'll be an interesting year. A lot of things will come about, and I kind of hope we don't do a lot because I think this is kind of a dangerous year when some things can get done politically that might not be the best idea.
Yeah, I'm Mike Dugan. I'm the senator for the 30th district, which is most of Carroll, portions of Douglas, and portions of Paulding. I've been there I'm in the middle of my 3rd term. We all do 2-year terms. I'm the chairman of economic development. I'm the secretary of transportation. I'm the secretary of public safety. And I'm the secretary of veterans, military affairs, and homeland security. So I'm taking notes really well. What I think we're going to see a little bit, there's obviously some holdover legislation from last year that I'm sure we'll talk about here. Adoption reform is going to be one of the ones that we re-engage back on. Small business reform, SB 2 is one of the things that we'll re-engage back on. For you lawyers in the room, e-filing will be one of those that we re-engage back on. What I'm a little worried about, and they've touched on it down here so far, is everybody that's running for something else may use some of these things as their own platform to get headlines. And that would be unfortunate if that happens. Because anytime that you put the desires of the individual over the needs of the state and the impact that it'll have on the state is a poor policy. So we'll see. Hopefully we get in, knock some of these things out that we've been sitting over there, pass a strong budget that increases what we need to cover for the state and come home. So, but we'll see.
Well, first and foremost, we really do appreciate what y'all do. It's not easy, so you got to squeeze it in a 3-month period, basically. And you guys look at every year on average, somewhere between, 3,500 to 4,000 pieces of legislation that you have to filter through and, decide what not to do, what to do, and that's not an easy task. So I think I expressed, everyone's appreciation in this room. You guys put a lot of work in a short amount of time. It's not an easy job. We appreciate it very much. Speaking of that, let me, before we start, get off on some topicality, what's the most effective way for constituents to reach policymakers and maybe influence legislation? We see form letters all the time, Capitol visits, fly-ins, drive-ins, Vegas trips and quill hunts, all those things. So what's really important for constituents to be able to, get their message to their policymaker?
Yeah, we're all going to be a little bit different, but quill hunting in Vegas.
Okay, all right.
Form letters don't work. Form letters that are the worst thing you can do, because what that tells me personally is you don't have enough interest in this subject that you're sending me something about to actually put your own thoughts into it. And I especially love it when the form letter says, "Dear Senator," and it says insert name here, and they still send it. And it goes, have you even read this form letter? So me personally, you send me a form letter, delete. You send me a personalized email, I'll respond to it. You send me a personalized letter, I'll respond to it. You call me, I'll respond to you. If you want a visit to the Capitol, it excites. You know, it's like somebody's coming to visit. And you want to show them around, you want to listen to them, you want to engage with somebody from your district coming up to the Capitol. But form letters, don't even waste the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The form letters just don't work. When we're sitting there and suddenly our inbox fills up with a couple of hundred form letters, the sense is just to delete them because it's some advocacy group usually that didn't really think this thing out. Somebody sent out a notice and said, okay, you need to contact your senator's representative. So I'd rather have a personal email. That's usually easier to handle, especially during the session. Phone calls become kind of difficult. But a personal email expressing your interest in something and maybe why it's important to you and to my district. And it helps to be from my district too. When we start getting these from all over the state, it's pretty difficult. So if you respond to me, if you ask me to do something, please put your name, sign your name, and give me your address so I know that you're in my district, and I promise you I will do my best to respond to it.
Yeah, I would like to say that the whole form letter thing, I'm intrigued by that, how all that works out. You've got an issue that pops up, you've got people that are on these websites, and they send you 200 form letters, and there may be one person in the district that sent an email. So I'm good with personal emails, phone calls. I'm really impressed when I have constituents that follow the legislation, that know the process, and it goes to the committee. They maybe be at a committee meeting or the day it comes up for a vote. You know, they page me and they come out and give me some input on that. So you know, those are some ways that if you're really interested in legislation, you get involved in the process and watch it go through the process. And I think that helps me out personally because it shows me that constituent is engaged and educated about the issue. They're just not turning on Fox News or MSNBC and getting a current event and just running with it. So that to me, the phone calls and emails are very helpful.
I'm a little old fashioned. I like face to face. So if you get a chance to do the drive in or fly up or whatever, of course, if you're flying to the Capitol from Carroll, then you got way more money than me. But come see us. Come see us during the session, and then of course in the off season, you know, us coming to see you. That's really how we get that face to face, and it's hard to represent someone if you don't go talk to them. So, but I'll reiterate on the form letters. I don't delete them. Actually, I used to delete them, and then what I've started doing now is actually archive them. And what that does is gives me kind of a count, a tally of how many people are interested in a certain issue. So I've started doing that. But yeah, I totally agree with exactly what Senator Dugan said. If you're not going to take the time and effort to personalize, even to putting our name in it, you know, then why should we put the time and effort into responding? So, but we do, you know, keep track of it and pay attention to it because it's important to know if there is a certain issue and you are getting a lot of form letters, then there is a big group of people that are interested in that thing. But a lot of times, you know, you do get constituents that will go ahead, instead of doing the form letter, they will go ahead and personalize it, and those will get responded to. You know, and for me, I actually list my cell phone on pretty much everything, and so just pick up the phone and call if you got an issue. And you know, if I can't answer, I'll call you right back. And I know these guys are very responsive too, so just pick up the phone and call our office. Our assistants will let us know, and we'll get back to you and get your thoughts on something, especially if you have an issue with a government agency and you know, we call it constituent services. I know each one of these guys takes as much pride in it as I do. And really, I think a lot of elected officials take for granted the value of being an incumbent is not going to the ballot and having an I by your name. The value is that we are able to help people along the way. And the longer you're there, the more people you've helped. And that right there is where the value of being an incumbent is. And some folks up there don't understand that. They don't return calls, they don't return emails, and there's a lot of constituents that have a need, that need help with, whether it's getting Medicaid payments or you know, having problems with assisted living, whatever it is. You know, that's where we can help. And again, the more people we help, to me, the more value it is for y'all. So that's kind of, I guess that's my thoughts.
So I definitely prefer a phone call. Excuse me. My cell phone, like Matt's, is out everywhere. If y'all have an issue, particularly with constituent services, just pick up the phone and call me. If there's an event going on that you need me or us to be at, somebody, then pick up the phone and give me a call. My cell phone's out there all over the place. When it comes to advocating for issues, I would suggest coming to the Capitol, particularly if you're really for or really against something. The thing that everybody in and around the Capitol understands the most are numbers. Because most, I'm not speaking for any of these guys up here, but of our colleagues, they care about their next re-election. So if you come advocate on your issue, and there's a lot of people on that issue that are where you're at, it makes a big difference. Obviously, as a constituent of ours, when you come talk to us, we take that very seriously. But that face-to-face interaction is a big deal. So I prefer me and you looking at each other eye to eye, or us talking on the phone. That's generally the best way to know where somebody's at, when you can see their eyes or you can hear their voice inflection. So that's what I prefer, and obviously we're always open to help each other out. And just because we might represent some different areas, we do look after everybody in Carroll County whenever we can help. We're not going to say, hey, what district do you live in? We're just going to help you. So it's an honor to do that.
Hey, let me make a quick comment on the form letters. Back early in my time in the House, I had gotten a bunch of form letters, and they were from my district, and there were probably 20 or 25 of them. So I formed a reply, and I sent that reply back to all of those people. And I just got chewed out by one of my constituents about the fact I sent them back a form letter reply.
That was back in the day when they had to mail it in.
No, this was email, but he just came back at me, and of course he copied everybody. Well, I can't believe that you can't personalize it back to us. And I sent it back. I said, do you realize you sent me a form letter? And I never heard anything else from him.
It's kind of like voting for Dancing with the Stars. Some of them, it'll be the same person that sends in 10 of them,
Yeah.
and changes a letter in their name, and you go, come on, man, I can figure this out.
Moving on to some topicality, what I want to do is just kind of throw out some general questions we've got from other people, including our people on our Government Affairs Committee here at the Chamber. In fact, if you're on that committee, if you would stand real quick, so we can kind of quasi-recognize you. Right now, I know we got Laura back there, and Michael.
Yeah, we want to know who you are.
Yeah.
That's right. We got Ashley, Kathy. We're gonna go back and construct our new form letters that don't look so. So, moving on to some topicality, what we'd like to do is maybe, you know, if you feel froggy, jump in. You don't necessarily have to pass all the way down and reiterate. Feel free to weigh in. But based on a recent broadband study conducted by UGA and other partners around the state, are there any statewide initiatives on the horizon that address the need for rural Georgia, including the West Georgia region?
I'll take that. At the end of last year, the Speaker appointed a committee, or what do you call it, a council, the House Rural Development Council. And that was one of the big topics. They've met a number of times. I went to the first 2 or 3, and that has been a big topic. And I don't know what will come out of the council. There may be some proposed legislation, but some of the things that were discussed with some advances in technology that might make it easier to get that broadband to places that it's not getting now. And also, there was a big discussion about maybe having some type of incentives to the providers to be able to get that to the rural areas that are struggling with it right now. But I can assure you, it is a very big topic. I think the Senate also had a committee that is looking into that specific area. So the answer is there's a lot of attention to it. and I anticipate some proposed legislation and/or solutions, maybe not legislative solutions, but some strong encouragements to the providers to provide that service in places where it's just not happening right now.
Yeah, Representative Nix touched on it, but the Senate has the Rural Broadband Study Committee, led by Senator Steve Gooch. And then the House, they've got their, basically just kind of studying all of rural Georgia. And, you know, broadband, healthcare is all a piece of that. But, you know, so we haven't seen what's come out of those committees yet, or out of those study committees yet, so we don't necessarily know exactly what legislation we'll be going after, but I'll just touch a little bit on the technology. You know, right now, you've got the AT&Ts of the world, the Verizons of the world, they've got these small cells that basically carry the 5G. And so, you know, they're looking to put them on tops of, you know, light poles, telephone poles and all that. And what that's gonna do is the more of those, it takes some of the traffic off of the 4G and puts it onto that 5G and frees up space on that 4G, which will eventually help some of these underserved areas or even the high traffic areas as well. So from a technology standpoint, you'll see that. Legislation regarding it, what you're gonna see is we're probably gonna have to do something on some cities and counties are really limiting where they can put those. So you may see us step in, or you may not, but we may eventually have to step in and say, well, you know, put some rules on them and say, you know, you can or cannot allow this. So, and I don't, again, we don't know exactly how that's gonna look, but just that the technology's there to help. We just gotta figure out what we can do as a state to help get it out there.
And 6G is coming. And that's the next one it's ready to go. It's coming. And that will even, here, let me borrow that. I believe even take a smaller repeater transponder, which will help. But what they touched on here, and we talked about rural broadband here, but we're trying to figure out how to turn back the tide of the two-state problem that we're having right now. We have the major metropolitan areas, and then we have the rest of the state of Georgia. We can't continue to function that way. And we can't continue to function with just all of our focus being on Atlanta, Macon, Savannah, Augusta. Those are important parts of the state, don't get me wrong. That's like 60% of the population of the state. You know, and if you add those areas up, we don't live there. And we're responsible for taking care of the entire state. So how do you do the broadband? How do you do the rural health care? How do you keep these hospitals from closing down while maintaining a conservative tax state? I guess is the best way to do it. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
It really will. I know it's complicated too. We talk about increasing cellular bandwidth versus true broadband. And there's a difference between high-speed internet and broadband. And we're in the utility business as well, so we understand the whole attachment agreements and all the technical language that goes into that. It's very serious for the entire state. So I know that's not an easy task, and I don't envy you all on that. I'm glad that you know me. But
He's about to be you. No, I'm just playing. Not really.
You know, and you mentioned healthcare, Senator Dugan. So everybody tighten up for a second. With no end in sight to the repeal, replace, repair debate on the national healthcare stage, what should Georgia do, if anything, about its current Medicaid reimbursement policies?
Current meaning today, because that's not necessarily going to be the same thing it is tomorrow, which is not going to be what it is next month. The dilemma that we get in is, first of all, you hear people say, why does Georgia not have the Affordable Care Act? Georgia does have the Affordable Care Act. We just went through the federal exchange. We did not set up a separate exchange for Georgia. But Georgians can sign up, matter of fact, it's in their enrollment right now, can sign up for coverage under the Affordable Care Act. So that's a misnomer that's been put out there that wanted to clarify.
anytime that we go to make modifications with how we do healthcare is the second largest budget expenditure we have within the state. Education's obviously first at 52%, and then the next 21% is healthcare for Georgians. Anytime we go to make a modification, a tweak to it, to help those across the state, the feds start saying, here's what we're going to do to modify it. So the federal health care drives the Georgia health care. We can't make adjustments and then have them turn around and make another adjustment, and then we have to go back in and undo or redo what we just did before. So, love my federal brethren over there, most of the time, but, we need them to make a decision so we can arrange it in our state the way that we need to, that complements what they're doing in the federal law.
Earlier in the year, when the House and Senate, the U.S. were having the debate on repeal and replace, the House had an amendment. Excuse me. Choked up again. The House had an amendment, and what that amendment was going to do, I think it was the MacArthur or something amendment. What it was going to do was allow the states to have. I'm fine now. Thank you. Then. You'll just hold that for me.
It's just like a senator.
There was an amendment that was going to allow the states to repeal the parts of Obamacare that they did not want or didn't feel like their citizens needed. And if they would go back and do that as a standalone bill and let us tailor our health care to Georgia citizens versus this, all or nothing approach and one size fits all approach, our health care needs are different than California and New York, just like our education needs are different. And so if they would give us that freedom with that amendment or make it a standalone bill, then we could have that leeway to go ahead and make some changes. And the problem, all right, I'll take the water.
It's all right. It's a very emotional topic.
It is. Sorry. And the problem with the Affordable Care Act, it was never about affordable health care. They made it about affordable health insurance. And so if they would give us the freedom to kind of go in and pick and choose what we think is best for our citizens, then we could focus more on affordable health care and not focus on the affordable health insurance.
This has been a no man's land forever. This is not a new issue. In my first or second year, we didn't get out until almost the end of April one year because we had to wait to see what the feds were going to do with the funding for Medicaid. And so the fact that we've got the Affordable Care Act and all, it complicates it some, but it's really not a new issue. If they could get to some point where we could get the block grants where we had the flexibility to do the things that we feel like are best for Georgians, I think that would be the best plan. I think there's some legislation that's been introduced since the repeal and replace did not make it that has some provisions in there that would be much more fair to the states who did not expand their Medicaid. So I'm optimistic that maybe there's some changes coming, but right now it's just a no man's land. As Senator Dugan said, if you go and try to make a change, then the change you make this year, by the end of the year, could be totally nullified by what happens at the Fed level. So the feds end up driving that a whole lot more than we want them to.
This is what we're seeing right now is the result of decades of states, individual states, not fighting the federal government when it comes to the federal government entering into the fray that they literally have no constitutional authority to enter into. In the Constitution, it does not provide the ability to the federal government to tell us in Georgia what we have to do or don't have to do with our health care. And for too long, governors from all the states, with the exception of a few, maybe Texas, a few others, have stood up to the federal government regularly. With this issue in particular, there were 28 attorneys general who went to the Supreme Court to essentially Dugan as well, which is they don't have the authority, the federal government that is, to do this. Now we're seeing the result of what happens when the federal government does get involved in things like healthcare, which are very personal to us and used to be a doctor-patient relationship. Now it's a doctor, insurance, patient relationship. Now it's a doctor, government, insurance, patient relationship. We're getting further and further away from our own care. That's not the fault of the doctors. It's not the fault of the patients. Frankly, in a lot of instances, it's not the fault of the insurances either. It's what happens when we get more government. It's going to happen this way every single time. Outside of the military, can y'all tell me something that the government does well? No, not really. I mean, not really. So that said, what we need to do is start to unravel this ball on the federal level, i.e. get out. But like, listen to what we're saying. We have to wait on the federal government. Well, we're a sovereign state. We shouldn't have to wait on the federal government to tell us what we can and can't do. Now, when it comes to constitutional issues that they have the authority to do, certain the interstate system stuff that they're a part of, obviously the military, immigration, things of that nature that they have the authority to act on, yes, that's very important and they should take care of that job. But everything else belongs to us, the people of Georgia. We don't need to look like Colorado. We don't need to look like California. We don't need to look like Alabama. We're Georgia. We'll support them to, I think I've said this before here actually, I'll support Massachusetts to have same-sex marriage, to have health care for the state, to have whatever they want to, that's for Massachusetts. But for Georgia, I've got a different set of principles, and I am a Georgian, and that's who I'm elected to represent. So we have to get back to that. That's going to unravel a lot of this issue that we deal with on health care.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Next question, please.
He just gets them after it's all over.
Let the freshman answer. What regional transportation initiatives do you foresee being introduced, and what should our region and regional and statewide transportation priorities? What should be our regional and statewide transportation priorities?
You want better on the transportation side. Most of us.
Again, we talked about the legislative period's 40 days, and everything should go up there for 40 days, and you come home, you don't do anything else until the next session. Actually, you'll hear the term study committee a lot during our presentation. There's another study committee that's been going on all summer in prep for this this coming session that is on transit across the state. There's going to be a significant emphasis on the metro Atlanta area. Surprisingly enough, once you get stuck in traffic every day for hours on end, mass transit starts to become more appealing. Light rail typically comes up. Light rail is extremely expensive and kind of fixed on where it can go and hard to change once you put it in. So it's there are some advantages to it. Obviously you put a whole lot of people on there if they ride it, but they're only going to ride it if it goes where they need to go. So one of the other things we're looking at is called BRT, bus rapid transit, dedicated lanes at certain times during the day where you get on the buses, and people have a little bit more of an aversion to a bus than they do subway for some reason. That's something we're going to have to work past. But within the metro area, bus rapid transit, where you use existing infrastructure that's dedicated, so you're not sitting in a bus in the same traffic jam that you're sitting in your car. But as the demographics change and as population density changes, you can change or rapidly change the bus routes, unlike the fixed route. So both of those are going on, and again, in the major metro area. That being said, I want to be able to get on a form of rapid transit in Cobb and get to Gwinnett without paying 4 different transportation authorities fees and not having them interconnect with each other on the schedule and taking me 2.5 hours to cover 2 counties. They ought to be synchronized. If you're going to solve some part of this problem, you ought not have everybody setting up their own transit authority. They ought to be synchronized a little bit more. Now, how does that help us in Carroll County? Honestly, not much right now. Because one of the things that has to happen with mass transit to be effective is the population densities we talked about a second ago. People come to a mass transit center. Mass transit centers don't go to individual people. That's not the way the system works. Or you can be sitting there all day long with an 8-wheel taxi going from house to house to house. The visionaries within our organization say, but wait, it's going to change within the next 20 years. The autonomous vehicles are coming. They're going to be here. You can already start to see with the way the millennials respond, the sales of vehicles of all brands are going down. People are not buying cars anymore because they call Uber, they call Lyft, they call a whole variety of different services out there that they are using now. And that's going to change even more when the vehicle becomes autonomous. And I can call and have car A at my house at such and such time, drive me to where I need to go, leave to go get somebody else. And I'm not paying for parking or gas or anything else. I'm just paying for the service of the vehicle when I use it. So I've taken it from transit all the way down to how it's going to be an impact on us in the future. But short answer is there's study to be for that.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, I was just gonna say, what the senator's trying to say is we're looking into it. I think there are a couple of interesting things here. One, Speaker Murphy, who was not from Atlanta, was extremely instrumental in expanding the interstate systems and working on transit in the Atlanta area. And I think it's real interesting now that Speaker David Ralston, who is also not from Atlanta, has come out. I think at Eggs and Issues last year, he introduced this as a very high priority issue to begin to discuss and to look at solutions for the transit problem, not just in the metro area, but extending out, I would assume, to the Carrollton area and a lot of areas that get caught in that metro thing. So I think the good news is at the level that things can really be moved forward, that we're getting more interest in it. And when those type of people put their weight behind it, you begin to see things happen.
I just want to weigh in real quickly on this. And while I think it's important to have these study committees and look at how we can enhance the transportation for all of Georgia, one of the arguments that Kevin made, I think, can be made on the local and state level as well. One of the things when I was mayor that we really lobbied and worked hard against, and Marty Smith can attest to this, is these regional planning commissions that encircle Atlanta, the ARC, they keep on coming out further and further and further, and they make you do what they want you to do. And so while certainly transportation is very important, again, that one size fits all doesn't apply to everyone in the state. And I want to make sure that if we're put in some type of transportation planning committee or region or commission, that it's something that our Board of Commissioners in Carroll County would like, or Board of Commissioners in Douglas County would like. Because that same theory about federal government coming in and telling you what you're going to do, we certainly don't want that at the state level, because what works in Cobb might not work in Carroll. So I think it's a very slippery slope there that we have to be aware of. And constant communication with your local people is very important for that.
Yeah, I think Representative Collins just kind of nailed it. Carroll County getting thrown into the Atlanta Metropolitan Planning Organization, to me, is a little bit insane. So on a long-term scale, I think we got to look at this MPO almost reform on how we're doing that. Now, it is mandated by the federal government that based on population, once you hit a certain threshold, you are forced into a metropolitan planning organization. So when Carroll County hit a certain, or up in Villa Rica hit a certain population, they got thrown into, their only option was to go into the Atlanta MPO. And so now Carroll County has money going to the Atlanta MPO that isn't necessarily coming back. Same thing happened to Coweta 2 censuses ago. we got drawn in and we got money going into that Atlanta MPO, and we're really not seeing the return on it. So if we could see some sort of reform to allow, basically, I think all the power there and all the money is all going into that Atlanta MPO, and we're giving them too much. And so if we could see more of a regional approach, allowing suburban Atlanta, so to speak, give us a little more say-so in what our dollars and what we're doing with our dollars in regards to transportation, then I think we could see some better regional transit for our areas.
We can establish our own MPO, or we can.
Not until the next census.
Not until the next census, but we can.
We shouldn't have to wait, and we all traveled to DC, we were all there.
Dude, that was your guy.
Where's that bus?
Yeah, talking about mass transit, that was the bus just running over them. But I agree with it. We had this meeting in DC and we said, okay, where does MPO stop? Anniston, Alabama. Where does the Atlanta Regional Commission's border stop? Does it cross state lines? And I'm like, oh. And I said, because it's very simple, don't happen that way. Now, we can do it on the next census. It's one of those that's actually run by the Census Bureau that sets the thing up. And they're willing to accommodate us. We do have to wait until we come in because you can't tell your population density of whether you need to establish an MPO until you have a new census to determine how many people you have in your population. But it is doable. We just have to wait.
Briefly, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't know of a mass transit system in the world that pays for itself. Not one. Is there?
I don't know of a road network in the world that pays for itself.
Right. Well, our taxes go to pay for roads, and driving in Georgia is not a right, it's a privilege. So while we do need to continue to tackle the transportation issues that plague this state and that are creeping out in our area even, we also need to be very careful with the taxpayer monies here in Georgia to make sure that when we're talking about things like mass transit, that we tread lightly.
Thank you very much. Real quick, are there going to be any questions from the floor today, or does anybody have something jotted down? If you don't want to stand up and ask a question, if you want to pass them forward to the end of your tables, we'll be glad to pull them up here and try to read them into the question. We only got a few more minutes, and I know he's got to make a few closing remarks. But if you've got something you don't want to ask, just send them forward. Senator Dugan, you mentioned when we first started talking about e-filing. I guess like legislative documents, and I'm familiar with a company here locally that's started up with that. I know some surrounding states do that. Is that something that's coming back to you guys this session? And where does that stand? What is that? Where do we stand with that?
It's not done.
Okay.
There's a convoluted process in anything. It's called a conference committee, where you take 3 guys from the Senate side, you take 3 people from the House side, you go into a room, you yell at each other for a little bit, and you try to come up with language that both sides can live with. That's where it is right now. And so the conference committee was never dissolved. So we're actually meeting tomorrow to try to work out some of this resolution. We're trying to catch up with the great state of Alabama, who's done the e-filing for years. And the only holdup that we're having right now is our friends from the media, but the Atlanta media, a significant newspaper out of Atlanta, that says they can't see the document as quickly as they are with the paper file, which is not true. But it's the First Amendment Foundation, which is also run by the guy that runs the AJC. Talk about a little conflict of interest there. But yeah, it would help a company that's local. But there are other companies out there that are not local that do the same service, and
and you can pick the service and they interact. So, yeah, it's, for me, fun.
Still in play. All right, lastly, let me just say, are there any legislative issues coming up this session that will create or contribute to the economic development initiatives in our region?
Senate Bill 2.
All right.
I think on that particular issue, as I thought about it a little bit, it is, I think we just need to be steady as we go. We need to make sure that we don't do things to stop what's going on, because Georgia, by most any measure, has done quite well. This region has done extremely well, even compared to the rest of the state. So I think there's some things out there, but the things that we have been doing have been working, and my greatest fear is not, or my interest is not that we create something else that's going to be super good, but that we do something that might hamper where we are now and the direction we've been going in. And so I think there's a word of caution there that we're doing pretty good, and we don't want to do something that would mess that up.
I think that you see some more interest in talking about some tax legislation. I think there's some legislation that came out of Chairman Jay Powell's Ways and Means Committee that's in conference committee to lower the income tax rate for a good number of Georgians. I think that's very important. I think that looking at the tax code and modernizing the tax code is going to be very important. And I certainly hope that that'll be looked at a little more closely this next session. You know, as most of you here in the room are small business owners and bricks and mortar, you know, I think that you're put at a disadvantage when you're having to compete with some online services that are selling goods and products, and the state's just not collecting that sales tax. You know, I'm not for imposing another sales tax, but, you know, the law is the law. If you walk up to a business in House District 68 or in Carrollton, you purchase a product, you have to pay sales tax on that. And so it puts you at a disadvantage if your consumer is able to go somewhere and not pay sales tax on a product. So I think that there's some ways that we can adjust and focus on making sure that there's a level playing field for all of our businesses, and especially small business, because you're the heart of our community and the heart of our district. So that I think that's something you'll see some more discussion come about, and that within itself will generate some economic development, I feel like.
For me, the biggest thing for economic development is making sure we've got the workforce that's viable. And so, you know, continued investment into our technical college system, into our higher ed, making sure that when these jobs are coming, we don't want these jobs just to come and bring other people with them. We want these jobs for Georgians. We want to put Georgians to work. And so for us, the work-based learning, continued investment in that. The HOPE grant, we're expanding that, adding 5 more vocations into that. I think we're going from 12 to 17. So we can continue things like that. Programs like 12 for Life, things like here at the Burson Center, we got going. Anything we can do to continue to grow our workforce and make sure they are trained for the jobs that are coming.
And to piggyback on actually what Representative Nick said, he's exactly right. And I think one of our jobs, number one out the gate, is to do no harm. And when it comes to the economy and it bouncing back, particularly in our area, a lot of times it's just don't mess it up, particularly when it's on the uptick. So that's kind of my thinking coming into the next session. And obviously, as Representative Collins mentioned, anytime we can look at tax reform and lessen the burden on individual citizens here in Georgia, then I'm all for that.
Well, guys, we are out of time. We appreciate y'all taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. You know, you guys do a great job for us. I pick and tease with you because, I mean, I love you and I know you personally, but you guys do a great job on behalf of the Chamber and the Government Affairs Committee. And we really appreciate y'all being here today.